Games rule. This isn't a connotative sentence about an opinion of games, but a denotative sentence being used to define games as simply as possible. To make the sentence sound more like a literal definition, we can add one word to create the sentence, games are rules. It's an epiphany to no one that games are systems upon which players are instructed to think and or act, but I wanted to take a look at the nature by which the rules themselves are instituted upon players. In this discussion, it's important we divide video games from analog games. Most of games discourse these days seems to surround video games, likely indirectly due to their accessibility, volume of single-player experiences, and heavy marketing and advertising. But to ignore analog games would be to ignore the majority of this conversation. See, in video games, we follow rules because we must. This isn't to say that players want to break the rules, but that rules are enforced in video games the same way that the laws of physics are enforced in real life. With the obvious exception of hacking or modding, you can't make Mario fly in Super Mario Bros. The game simply wasn't programmed to allow this action to happen. And while there is a lot to say about glitches and exploits here, that would be orthogonal to the discussion and is best left for another video. Conversely, analog games may have rules in a little pamphlet, but those rules are as paper thin as the pamphlet itself. In truth, it's the players who enforce these rules. For example, if I'm playing a game of chess and make an illegal move, any other player can recognize the error and fix the mistake. The consequence of this is that the rules of analog games are as fluid as the players who follow them. For example, sometimes players simply aren't familiar with the rules of a game. They may think that that chess move was legal and continue playing without giving it a second thought. Alternatively, some games' rulebooks simply don't address situations that can arise in play. In these contexts, players have to fill in the blanks. Even if the creator of the game addresses these outside of the rulebook, not all players will know. But even players who do know are free to play with or without these rules. There's no coding or programming stopping them, such as in the case with video games, where this luxury isn't permitted without the use of hacking or mods. But with this in mind, players can disregard rules whether they're in the official rulebook or not. This is colloquially known as house rules. When a group of players have their own rules, they're just as valid as the rules being enforced by the game's manual, as long as all players agree to follow them. Perhaps the most notorious example of house rules comes from Monopoly, a board game that's developed so many house rules that many players are more familiar with these house rules than the original rules. Some popular ones include bonuses for landing on the go space and the decision not to buy and or auction property when landing on a property space. In fact, many digital versions of Monopoly even allow you to enable some popular house rules in their settings. That said, just because video games are bounded by programming doesn't mean players haven't found means of imposing house rules despite these limitations. Sometimes this is as simple as playing a fighting game where you and your opponent agree not to jump. But there are many examples of house rules being curated to the point of being independently understood. We generally refer to this as metagame. In some cases, metagame is practiced to compare skill among players, such as in competitive games in which characters or stages may be disallowed. In other cases, metagame is practiced to enhance the challenge a game promotes, such as in a Pokemon Nuzlocke. Whatever the case may be, metagame exists for players seeking more out of their games than what the base rules provide. One of the many beauties of self-imposed rules is their impermanence. For example, if a player decides to do a Pokemon Nuzlocke without using a Pokemon Center, only to later find that this is too difficult, it's their prerogative to change that rule. Others may think that they are cheating or not successful at their challenge, but as long as the player is happy with their decision and experience, the fun they have is valid. Tabletop role-playing games takes the fluidity of rules to a whole new level. It's not uncommon for these kinds of games to be facilitated by one player, referred to as a dungeon master or game master. This player's exact role varies from what kind of game they're playing, but it can range anywhere from being a storyteller to a referee. In my experience, the best ones aren't the ones who are the most knowledgeable of the rules, but the ones who know the best times to break the rules. This shouldn't come as a surprise given everything we've discussed thus far, but it's important to recognize why this is. The rules we follow when playing games are designed with the intention of maximizing enjoyment. Whether we derive that fun from the creativity of the experience, the achievement of overcoming an obstacle, or even something else entirely, rules are followed to facilitate this. When one player wields the power of the rules, it can be especially rewarding when they bend them in favor of an outcome. Of course, it's also important that the players feel as though this is fair. For this reason, being a game master requires a sound understanding of what their players want out of the game. By tailoring an experience around these goals, a game master can establish set pieces that grant their players ample opportunities to accomplish tasks while also providing them with the feeling that it was earned rather than given. In a way, the official rulebooks for these types of tabletop games are best looked at as recommendations rather than law, as play sessions dictated by an experienced game master have more opportunity for unexpected results. As long as this game master can balance fair play with rewarding events, players can have a truly novel adventure. Above all else, no matter the kind of game, play is meant to enable entertainment. Players engage in the activities from which they derive the most pleasure. Oftentimes, that will mean holding the keys to their own system structures, and this may involve circumventing authority. In this way, the title of this video isn't entirely accurate. Games don't rule, players rule.